Hey, how's it going, everybody? Shaun here for another edition of Shaun's Solo Reviews. And today I'm going to be talking about Hatred. Yeah, so I finally got to play it. I was going to have some gameplay, or do a gameplay video, rather than review it, actually. But, it proved a little difficult for me to capture some footage. I primarily use Fraps for getting PC game footage. And, well, it doesn't work with Fraps. It actually tells you that before you start up the game, if you have Fraps running in the background, that it causes problems and the game will crash. And while Fraps is still active, it does not allow you to record gameplay footage that way. I tried a few other things. I mean, I tried for like a couple hours, and then I just kind of gave up. Every other program I used FF Split and then another one too, like a trial version of another one, and it just kept crashing the game. So I decided just against it. It was more trouble than it's worth. Because Hatred, at the end of the day, is a fairly mediocre game. Big surprise. Just like my summation before, it's a twin-stick shooter, for the most part. Not in the truest sense, though, because playing on a gamepad is kind of difficult. It's adverse. It's not optimized very well. It feels pretty terrible. So I ended up playing with a mouse and keyboard, primarily. I gave it a shot with the gamepad for a while, but the game is so difficult to a certain degree that playing on a gamepad just seems like a real waste of time, honestly. So the game has kind of an arcadey framing in the sense that like you can't really die. It's almost like a roguelike in a sense, I guess. Not entirely, but if you die in the game, you have to restart the level unless you do kind of these optional side quests, objectives, and gain things called respawn tokens. So it kind of made it feel like an arcade game to a certain degree. Yeah, so that was interesting. I mean, not unfair or anything like that, but it definitely kind of lessened my desire to keep playing it because, like I said, it is fairly mediocre. It is what it is. So you're this grim-dark Danzig stand-in, and you're running around, and you hate everything, and you decide you're going to massacre everybody and everything. And that's basically what the gameplay boils down to. Now there are some things that stand in your way, like the police will come and respond, and it's not dependent on how much chaos you incur. That's not really what's dependent on the police response. It's pretty automated. As soon as you start running around in the world, cops show up. You shoot people, cops show up. One of the interesting things, you can get in and out of cars, but if you were to be hit by a car, even just like love tapped as you're in the world, it's an instant kill. You're instantly dead. And that was incredibly frustrating because it can be hard sometimes to kind of see where a car is coming from because of the isometric view. You getting inside the car is almost pointless because you just get people just mow you down and like blow up your car. The pedestrians, some of them actually do fight back. If you are like randomly, some of them will have weapons, or if you are near a gun store, actually, people will have a lot of guns and they'll come and fight back. So that kind of goes against this idea that it's just like this sick power fantasy of just like murdering people. Other things of note, it kind of performs a little badly. It's a little sluggish. It's not detrimental to the point where you can't play it, but it definitely was a small annoyance, especially when it's so easy to die. It's actually a pretty challenging game, and that for me was kind of not a turnoff, but like it's so challenging at points that the idea of not having a respawn token because I didn't like go clear a police station or a mall or whatever and kill a bunch of people, that I was going to have to redo the level really sucked. It's got interesting lighting. It's got kind of this grayscale Sin City-esque kind of thing where there's small color pops, like depending on certain colors pop out, but it's mostly black and white kind of grayscale. And that actually caused me a lot of trouble because I was having a hard time seeing what was going on. Like, your situational awareness is really impaired by the visual design. Several times I'd be in a gunfight and I just couldn't see where the fuck like I was being attacked from. It ends up being kind of a big problem. And like I said before, just because of the whole respawn thing, it adds like this extra tension or stress, which I'm sure is part of the design. Like in terms of like, you know, you have to be a little bit more thoughtful. You have to be a little bit more careful. Another thing to note in the mechanical sense of it all is how you get health. Basically, how you heal your character. Well, like as much controversy was put towards this thing, you have to do things called executions. So when you down an enemy and they're crawling away, trying to get to safety, begging for their lives, you have to go and brutally execute them by going up and stabbing them in the face, shooting them in the head. Actually, I was kind of surprised how many different animation sets they had for it, but you do a cornucopia of things to execute people, and that's how you regain health. The thing about that is that it's so mechanical, it stops being shocking after about 5 minutes. Because you're going to have to do it a lot. It actually almost becomes annoying. You can actually turn off like the zoom in animation, where you get like kind of a cinematic presentation of your murder skills. But it's not offensive because you have to do it so much. It's just such a mechanical thing. It like any impact it carries with it, like it goes away within a few minutes. Some good things about the game, actually. The level design, kind of neat, kind of cool. Like there's a really interesting amount of variation, much more than I expected. You're not just in neighborhoods or in towns and like going and massacring people. You know, you go through things like sewers, or like there's actually one level that was actually really interesting. It was really cool. Was you're on a moving train. Like that was really cool. It's just hampered by the game itself, the mediocre mechanics. Also note the physics engine, the destruction engine, is really, really fun. Really, really interesting, really cool. I wish it was in a better game, I guess. Because it's got a lot of cool lighting. I mean, that's the thing about the game. Like, aesthetically, there is a lot of, like, interesting things about the game, just on a superficial aesthetic level. Even, you know, I know that I kind of complained about the grayscale, because it does. It visually muddies the game, but it does kind of look neat. And it's just, you know, and just to kind of wrap this thing up, because that's not really a ton to talk about, but other than the fact that it's a mediocre stick shooter that has like kind of postal posturing just to garner outrage and just attention to it. It's smart. It was a smart way to market the game. I think they were much more aware of what they were doing than some people would give them credit for. This is not some kind of sick murder simulator, and not any more than any other game ever. You know what I mean? Like this game's not even that violent, really, in terms of like, you know, viscera and what you're exposed to. The most violent things are the executions, and like I said, they become very stale. They become almost boring at a certain point, which you could say is like, oh, that's just an example of the desensitization of people with violence in video games. It's like, no, because we do this stuff in a lot of other games. I mean, like, even I've been listening to a new podcast I found, Kane and Rinse. Actually, really good if you're into more intellectually driven conversation about games. They've been talking about Max Payne 3, and it reminded me how fucking brutal that game is, in terms of even just torture and stuff like that. Or take something more recent, like The Last of Us. Like, that game is really brutal. Now, they say that, like, well, it's different because it humanizes the character, it shows the impact of the violence, and it's blah, 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 blah. Not really. Because during the gameplay, you might as well have just been a two-dimensional character that goes out massacring and murdering people. You kill a lot of people in The Last of Us. You kill more people than clickers. And just because they say things doesn't humanize them any more than they're humanized in hatred. Because everything about this game is super two-dimensional. Everything's very superficial. Everything's very surface level. You are not given enough information about anybody to care about any of them, including the main protagonist. Including Danzig. You're not going to care. You don't know anything about his motivations. You don't know anything about his perspective. The game is not glorifying his actions. You're just able to play through them. Some people may say, well, that's kind of a misnomer, but like, I disagree. There's nothing here other than like, this is an arcade game, and here's like kind of its violent framing. It's a gross framing device. And it's kind of, that's it. Doesn't really move beyond that in anything. It's not impressive in any way. And so, at the end of the day, it's just like, this game was given so much attention for nothing. And now it's at the top of the Steam sales list. It is the most popular game on Steam at the moment. So, like, what did you do? You didn't, like, people like myself that would be morbidly curious or just want to kind of engage in a backlash against just like moral grandstanding that goes on in all of media and all of writing and whatnot. These people are just sometimes it's ridiculous, and this is totally blown up in their face. I mean, most of these outlets that like condemn the game, they all fucking reviewed it. They all knew because it's about clicks, it's about money, it's about ad revenue, and that's fair. That's a business thing, but it is incredibly hypocritical taking the stance that they took into account. So at the end of the day, you have a fairly it's perfectly competent. It's not the best. It's not the worst. It's somewhere right in the middle. Even mechanically, the controls are a little bit sluggish. It's the mouse and keyboard stuff. Like while that is probably the preferred way to play, some of the implementation of buttons and stuff like kind of don't make sense. If you have to push in the L3 button, get the left joystick, you got to push it into run instead of that just being the norm, or I don't know, or you just use a different button for it. Things like that. It's just like things like that, like they just hadn't really figured it out, or maybe they had they played it so much internally they lost perspective on it. But like I said, super mediocre game. It's the definition of, hey, that's fine. That's fine. And the controversy surrounding it, unsurprisingly, not worth it. Not worth it at all. Especially considering all the other games that have come before it that are much worse. Even games that are given a more full context and have more three-dimensional characters, there's a lot worse games out there. You could pick up any of your Call of Duties and be more morally offended by what goes on in those games, and the glorification of war and the glorification of violence and the hoorah. It's not even Americanism. It's like hoorah globalism of fucking being a badass that goes out and kills terrorists. So to me, it's not any different than that. Honestly, it's like I said, everything is so one note, so two-dimensional that it doesn't affect you in any way because you're not going to be invested. The only thing that can invest you in this game are its mechanics, and some people are going to like it. I'm sure there are some people that are going to like this game. Hopefully it's for sincere reasons. But to me, just very average. Very average. Alright, everybody, I'm Shaun, and I will talk to you guys next time I have something to talk about.